What happens when a 20-year-old girl gets sold to a mafia boss she's never met? Elena Carter thought she'd face a dying old man, someone she could wait out, outlive, escape. Instead, she walks into a room and finds Viktor Sokolov, young, brutal, and completely in control. Her father traded her life for a debt. Her family's survival depends on her compliance. And the man who now owns her contract doesn't negotiate, doesn't apologize, doesn't even pretend this is anything but a transaction. This is the story of a forced marriage that became something neither of them expected. If you want to see how far this goes, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see where this story reaches. Let's begin. Boy. The cab smelled like stale cigarettes and fake pine air freshener. Elena pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching the unfamiliar city blur past. Gray buildings, narrow streets, people who looked like they belonged here. She didn't. She was 20 years old, and she was being delivered like a package. Her father hadn't even looked at her when he'd told her. Just sat there at the kitchen table, hands shaking around a glass of something that wasn't water, and said, "You're getting married." She'd laughed, actually laughed. To who? Viktor Sokolov. The name meant nothing to her then. It meant everything now. 3 days. That's all the time she'd had between her father's confession and this moment, this cab ride through a city she couldn't pronounce, heading toward a man she'd never met. Her father owed money. A lot of money. To people who didn't forgive debts. And the only currency he had left to offer was her. "Old bastard probably won't last a year," her father had muttered, trying to convince himself as much as her. "You wait it out. You come home. Everyone's safe." Elena had wanted to scream. She'd wanted to run. But her mother's face kept flashing in her mind, pale, frightened, trying not to cry. Her younger brother, just 16, pretending to be brave. If she refused, they'd pay the price. Her father had made that very clear. So here she was. The cab slowed. Elena's pulse kicked up. She sat straighter, gripping the handle of her single suitcase. Everything she owned that mattered crammed into one bag because she'd been told to pack light. Pack like you're not coming back. The driver said something in a language she didn't understand and gestured toward a building. No, not a building. A mansion. Iron gates, stone walls, security cameras tracking every angle. This wasn't a house. This was a fortress. The gates opened. This cab rolled through. Elena's hands were sweating. She wiped them on her jeans, hating how young she felt. How small. She'd tried to dress like someone who could handle this. Black jeans, a simple blouse, her hair pulled back. But she still looked like a college student playing dress-up. Because that's what she was. The cab stopped. The driver popped the trunk. Elena stepped out, her legs unsteady, and reached for her suitcase. A man in a dark suit appeared out of nowhere and took it from her. She flinched. "This way," he said in accented English, already walking. Elena followed because what else was she supposed to do? The front door was massive, dark wood, carved with designs she didn't recognize. It opened before she reached it. Another man in a suit, older. His eyes scanned her like she was cargo, checking for damage. "Miss Carter," he said, not a question. "Yes." "Follow me." The inside of the mansion was even more intimidating than the outside. Marble floors, high ceilings, art that probably cost more than her family's house. Everything was pristine, cold, beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. They walked down a long hallway, Elena's heartbeat hammered in her ears. She tried to breathe normally, tried to think. What was she supposed to say? How was she supposed to act? No one had prepared her for this. Her father had just shoved an address into her hand and told her to go. The man in the suit stopped in front of a set of double doors. He knocked once. "Come in?" The voice was deep, controlled. Elena's stomach dropped. The doors opened. The room was an office, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, leather chairs. But Elena didn't notice any of that. She noticed the man standing by the window, Viktor Sokolov. He wasn't old. Her father had lied. Or he'd been lied to. Or he'd just been desperate enough to believe what he wanted to believe. Because the man turning to face her now was maybe 30, maybe younger. Tall, dark hair, sharp jawline, dressed in a suit that fit him like armor, and his eyes, cold, assessing, completely unreadable, locked onto her like a sniper finding a target. Elena forgot how to breathe. "Miss Carter," he said, His accent faint but unmistakable. He didn't smile, didn't move toward her, just stood there, waiting. She forced herself to speak. Yes. Sit. It wasn't a request. Elena sat in one of the leather chairs, her hands gripping the armrest to keep from shaking. Victor moved to the desk, leaning against it, arms crossed. He studied her in silence. 10 seconds, 20. It felt like forever. How old are you? He finally asked. 20. Something flickered across his face, too fast to read. Your father didn't mention that. He probably didn't think it mattered. Victor's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. It doesn't. The bluntness hit her like a slap. Elena straightened her spine, refusing to shrink. So what now? Now, Victor said. You understand the terms. You're here because your father owes me a debt he can't repay. You're the collateral. We'll be married in 3 days. You'll live here. You'll follow the rules. In exchange, your family stays safe. Do you understand? Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him this was insane, that people didn't do this anymore. But she knew better. People like Victor did whatever they wanted, and people like her father paid the price. Do I have a choice? She asked quietly. No. At least he was honest. Elena looked down at her hands, trying to steady herself. What are the rules? Victor pushed off the desk and walked closer. Elena resisted the urge to lean back. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking down at her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided how to solve yet. You don't leave the property without permission, he said. You don't contact your family without approval. You don't ask questions about my business. You don't embarrass me in public, and you don't try to run. And if I do? His expression didn't change. Then your family suffers the consequences. There it was, the cage, fully visible now. Elena swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his eyes. Anything else? Yes. Victor's gaze didn't waver. You'll learn to adapt, quickly, because weakness doesn't last long in this world. Elena's jaw tightened. I'm not weak. We'll see. He turned and walked back to his desk, picking up a folder. Katya will show you to your room. You have 3 days to prepare for the wedding. Use them wisely. Elena stood, her legs shaky but holding. And after the wedding? Victor glanced up, his expression unreadable. After the wedding, you'll be my wife, and you'll learn what that means. Katya turned out to be a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She led Elena up a staircase that seemed to go on forever, down another hallway, and finally stopped in front of a door. This is your room, Katya said in heavily accented English. Bathroom through there. Closet is full. Dinner's at 7. Don't be late. She left before Elena could respond. Elena stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The room was bigger than her entire apartment back home. King-sized bed. Sitting area. Massive windows overlooking the estate grounds. It was beautiful. It was a prison. She dropped her suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking now that she was alone. This was real. This was happening. In 3 days, she'd be married to a man she didn't know, in a world she didn't understand, with no way out. Elena pressed her palms against her eyes, willing herself not to cry. Crying wouldn't help. Panicking wouldn't help. She needed to think. Viktor Sokolov, Mafia boss, dangerous, powerful, and young, way too young to be the dying old man her father had described, which meant her father had either been fed bad information or had been too desperate to care about the truth. Either way, Elena was stuck. She stood and walked to the window. The estate stretched out below her. Manicured gardens, high walls, guards patrolling the perimeter. No chance of running. Even if she made it past the guards, where would she go? She didn't know the city, didn't speak the language, didn't have money or contacts or anything that could help her survive out there. Her only option was to play along, at least for now. Elena turned away from the window and started unpacking. She had 3 days to figure out how to survive this. 3 days to learn the rules, read the room, find the cracks in the system. She wasn't weak, she wasn't helpless, and she sure as hell wasn't going to let Viktor Sokolov break her. Dinner was worse than she'd imagined. Elena arrived at the dining room at exactly 7, wearing the only dress she'd packed, simple, dark, nothing fancy. The room was massive, the table long enough to seat 20 people, but only 2 places were set, one at the head of the table, one to the right. Victor was already seated. Elena hesitated in the doorway. He looked up, his expression unreadable, and gestured to the empty chair. "Sit." She sat. A server appeared immediately, placing plates in front of them, some kind of roasted meat, vegetables, bread. It smelled amazing. Elena's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, too nervous to keep anything down. Victor picked up his fork. Elena did the same. They ate in silence. It was unbearable. Elena focused on her plate, cutting her food into smaller and smaller pieces, chewing slowly, trying not to make noise. Across from her, Victor ate with the kind of efficiency that suggested he had better things to do than sit here with her. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Victor looked up, his fork pausing midair. "You just did." Elena bit back a sarcastic response. "Why me?" "Your father offered you. I accepted." "But why accept? You could have just—" She stopped herself. Killed him. Hurt him. Done something worse. She didn't want to finish that sentence. Victor set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Your father owed me $2 million. He had no way to pay. Normally I'd make an example of him, but he made a different offer. One that served my purposes." "What purposes?" His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. "I need a wife." Elena's stomach twisted. "Why? That's not your concern." "It is if I'm the wife." Victor's eyes narrowed, but there was something almost amused in his expression. "You ask a lot of questions. You told me not to ask about your business. You didn't say I couldn't ask about this." He tilted his head, considering her. "Fair enough. I need a wife because it makes me look stable, legitimate, less of a target. In my world, a man without a family is seen as vulnerable, reckless. I can't afford that perception. So I'm a prop. You're a solution." Elena's hands clenched under the table. "And what happens when you don't need the solution anymore?" Victor stood, buttoning his jacket. "That depends on how useful you are." He walked out of the room without another word. Elena sat there, staring at her half-eaten dinner, her mind racing. He didn't need her to love him. He didn't even need her to like him. He needed her to exist, to play the role, to be seen. She could do that. She could be smart, careful, strategic. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a way out of this before it destroyed her. The next 2 days were a blur. Elena was measured for a wedding dress by a seamstress who didn't speak English and didn't smile. She was given a schedule, when to wake up, when to eat, when to be available for preparations. She was told what she could and couldn't wear, where she could and couldn't go. Every moment was controlled, and through it all she barely saw Victor. He was always somewhere else, locked in his office, meeting with men in suits, taking phone calls in languages she didn't recognize. When they did cross paths, he acknowledged her with a nod or a brief comment and moved on. It was like she was already invisible. Elena spent her time exploring the parts of the mansion she was allowed to access. The library, the sitting room, the garden. She memorized the guard rotations, the layout of the house, the exits that were locked, and the ones that weren't. She didn't have a plan yet, but she was gathering information, building a map. On the 3rd day, Katya knocked on her door at dawn. "Time to get ready," she said. Elena's stomach dropped. The wedding. She'd almost convinced herself it wasn't real, that something would happen to stop it. But nothing had. And now it was here. The seamstress returned with the dress, simple, elegant, white. Elena stared at it like it was a costume for a role she didn't want to play, but she put it on anyway. Let them do her hair, her makeup. Let them turn her into the version of herself that Victor needed. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. "Good," Katya said. "Now come." The ceremony was small. No guests. No family. Just Elena, Victor, an officiant, and a few of Victor's men standing in the background like silent witnesses. It took place in a room Elena had never seen before. Wood-paneled walls, heavy curtains, a single table with paperwork spread across it. Victor was already there, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his expression calm. He looked at her as she entered, his gaze sweeping over her once before returning to her face. "You look presentable," he said. Elena didn't respond. The officiant began speaking. Elena didn't hear most of it. Her mind was somewhere else, back home, with her mother and brother, wondering if they even knew this was happening. Wondering if they cared. "Elena Carter," the officiant said, "do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She opened her mouth. The word caught in her throat. Victor's eyes were on her, waiting. Elena thought about her family, about the debt, about the alternative. "I do," she whispered. "Victor Sokolov, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. No kiss? No celebration? Just paperwork." Victor signed his name, then handed the pen to Elena. She signed hers, and just like that, it was done. She was Mrs. Sokolov. Victor turned to his men. "Leave us." They filed out without a word. The officiant followed. The door closed. Elena stood there, still holding the pen, her hand trembling. Victor stepped closer. "It's done. I know. Do you understand what that means?" Elena looked up at him, her jaw tight. "That I'm stuck here. That I belong to you now." Something shifted in his expression. "You don't belong to me. You're bound to me. There's a difference." "Is there?" Victor reached out and took the pen from her hand, setting it on the table. "You'll learn." That night, Elena expected the worst. She'd heard stories, read books, seen movies. She knew what happened on wedding nights, especially in marriages like this. She'd prepared herself, or at least tried to. But when Victor showed her to a different room, larger, more private, he stopped at the door. "This is where you'll sleep," he said. Elena blinked. "And you?" "I have my own room. But I don't need to consummate this marriage tonight," Victor said, his tone flat. "Or any night for that matter. That's not what this is about." Elena stared at him, confused. "Then what is it about?" Victor's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something other than cold calculation. Something almost human. "Survival," he said. "For both of us." He left her standing there, alone in a room that was supposed to be theirs, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The days that followed were strange. Victor kept his distance. He was polite, but detached. He gave her space, but made it clear she wasn't free. He introduced her to his world in small doses, dinners with business associates, brief appearances at events where she was expected to smile and say nothing. She played the role. She didn't have a choice, but she also started paying attention. She learned names, faces, relationships. She listened to the way people talked to Victor, the way they looked at him. Fear, respect, calculation. Everyone wanted something from him, and he gave them nothing unless it served his purpose. Elena also started noticing the cracks. Victor was powerful, yes, but he was also tired. She saw it in the way his shoulders tensed during certain phone calls, the way his jaw tightened when someone mentioned a name she didn't recognize. He was fighting battles she couldn't see, and he was doing it alone. One night, about a week after the wedding, Elena found him in the library. He was sitting in a leather chair, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at nothing. She almost turned around and left, but something stopped her. "Can't sleep?" she asked. Victor glanced up, surprised to see her. "I could ask you the same thing." "I'm still getting used to this place." He nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "It takes time." Elena walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to anyway." She smiled faintly. "Why did you really marry me?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his glass and looked at her. "Because I needed someone who couldn't betray me." "How do you know I won't?" "Because if you do, your family dies. You won't risk that." Elena's chest tightened. "You're right. I won't." "I know." She sat down in the chair across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "So what now? I just exist here? Play the role? Pretend this is normal?" Victor leaned back, his expression unreadable. "For now, yes. But that will change." "How?" "You'll see." 3 weeks after the wedding, Victor made an unexpected announcement at breakfast. "You're going to start training." Elena looked up from her coffee. "Training for what?" Self-defense, language, etiquette, everything you'll need to survive in this world. She frowned. I thought you just needed me to stand there and look pretty. Victor's mouth twitched. That's part of it, but it's not enough. If you're going to be my wife, you need to be more than decoration. You need to be capable. Elena wasn't sure whether to be offended or intrigued. Why? Because I won't always be there to protect you, and because weakness is a liability. He stood, buttoning his jacket. Your first session is in an hour. Don't be late. He walked out, leaving Elena sitting there, trying to process what had just happened. Training. He was going to train her. She didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. The training was brutal. The self-defense instructor was a man named Alexei, mid-40s, built like a tank with a scar running down the side of his face. He didn't speak much English, but he didn't need to. His instructions were clear. Learn to fight or get hurt trying. Elena got hurt. A lot. Bruises bloomed across her arms and ribs. Her muscles screamed. She fell more times than she could count, but she got back up every time because something had shifted inside her. She wasn't just trying to survive anymore. She was trying to prove something to Victor, to herself. The language lessons were easier, but no less exhausting. A tutor named Irina drilled her on vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation. Elena's brain felt like it was going to explode, but she kept going, because every word she learned was a key, a way to understand the conversations happening around her, a way to stop being invisible. And through it all, Victor watched. He didn't say much, didn't offer encouragement or praise, but he showed up, to training sessions, to language lessons. He stood in the background, arms crossed, observing. And every time Elena caught his eye, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Interest. 2 months in, everything changed. Victor announced they'd be attending a gala, a high society event where powerful people gathered to make deals and show off their wealth. Elena would be expected to attend, to be seen, to play the role of the perfect wife. You'll need a dress, Victor said. Katya will take you shopping. Elena nodded, her stomach churning. She'd been to exactly one formal event in her life, her high school prom. This was going to be different. Katya took her to a boutique that didn't have prices on anything, which Elena took as a bad sign. The saleswoman measured her, brought out dresses, made suggestions. Elena felt like a doll being dressed up. But when she tried on the final option, a deep emerald gown that fit her perfectly, something clicked. She looked different, older, stronger, like someone who could belong in Victor's world. Katya nodded approvingly. Good. He'll like this. Elena wasn't sure why that mattered, but a small part of her hoped it was true. What? The gala was overwhelming. The ballroom was massive. Chandeliers, marble floors, tables covered in white linens and gold accents. Everyone was dressed to impress. Diamonds glittered, champagne flowed, and everywhere Elena looked, people were watching. Victor kept her close. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd, a subtle claim. He introduced her to people whose names she forgot immediately, whose smiles didn't reach their eyes. This is my wife, Elena, he said again and again, and every time she smiled, nodded, played the part. But she also listened. She caught fragments of conversations, business deals, alliances, threats disguised as pleasantries. This wasn't just a party, it was a battlefield. Halfway through the evening, a man approached them, tall, silver-haired, with a smile that made Elena's skin crawl. Victor, the man said in accented English. I didn't know you'd remarried. Dmitri? Victor replied, his tone neutral. This is Elena. Dmitri's eyes swept over her, lingering too long. Charming. Though I'm surprised you chose someone so young. Elena felt Victor's hand tighten slightly on her back. A warning. To her or to Dmitri, she wasn't sure. Youth has its advantages, Victor said calmly. Dmitri laughed. I'm sure it does. Tell me, Elena, are you enjoying your new life? It was a test. Elena could feel it. Everyone nearby had gone quiet, listening. She met Dmitri's gaze, refusing to look away. I'm learning a lot. I'm sure you are. Dmitri's smile widened, though I wonder how long that innocence will last in a world like ours. Elena felt anger flare in her chest. She was tired of being underestimated, tired of being dismissed. Innocence, she said carefully, and ignorance aren't the same thing. I'm observant enough to know when someone's testing me, and smart enough not to fail. The room went silent. Dimitri's smile faltered. Victor's hand on her back relaxed slightly. Approval, maybe. Well, Dimitri said, recovering, it seems you've chosen well, Victor. She has spirit. She does, Victor agreed. Dimitri nodded and walked away. The moment he was gone, the conversations around them resumed. Victor leaned down, his mouth close to her ear. That was reckless. He insulted me. He was testing you, and you passed. But don't make a habit of drawing attention. Elena turned to look at him. You wanted me to be capable. I'm trying. Victor's expression softened, just barely. I know, Boart. The rest of the night passed without incident. But Elena felt different, like something had shifted. She wasn't invisible anymore. She'd spoken up, made herself seen, and Victor had let her. On the drive home, he was quiet. Elena stared out the window, replaying the evening in her mind. You surprised me tonight, Victor said finally. Elena glanced at him. Good or bad? Both. She frowned. What does that mean? Victor looked at her, his expression unreadable. It means you're more than I expected, and that complicates things. How? He didn't answer, just turned back to the window. But Elena didn't need an answer. She'd seen the way he looked at her tonight. Not like property, not like a solution, like a person. And that terrified her more than anything else. The weeks that followed the gala felt different. Elena couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed, but something had. Victor was still distant, still controlled, but there were moments, brief, fleeting, where the wall between them seemed thinner. He started joining her for breakfast more often. Not every day, but enough that it became a pattern. They didn't talk much. Victor would read reports on his tablet while Elena worked through her language exercises. The silence punctuated only by the clink of silverware and the occasional question from Irina about pronunciation. But it was something, a routine that felt almost normal. The training continued. Alexei pushed her harder each session, and Elena's body adapted. The bruises faded faster. Her reflexes sharpened. She learned to anticipate his moves, to counter instead of just defend. One morning, she actually managed to flip him, a move she'd practiced 100 times but never successfully executed. Alexei hit the mat with a grunt, then looked up at her with something that might have been respect. Again, he said. Elena's lungs burned, sweat dripping down her spine, but she got into position. Again. Victor was watching from the doorway. She didn't know how long he'd been there, but when she glanced over, he gave her a single nod before walking away. That nod meant more than it should have. The language lessons were paying off too. Elena could understand fragments of conversations now, enough to know when people were talking about her, or about Victor, or about things they thought she couldn't comprehend. She kept her face neutral, filed away the information, and said nothing. Irina noticed. You're a fast learner, she said one afternoon, closing her textbook. Faster than most. I'm motivated, Elena replied. Yes, I can see that. Irina studied her for a moment. Can I give you some advice? Elena nodded. Be careful how much you let them see. In this world, knowledge is power, but showing what you know too soon can be dangerous. Who's them? Irina smiled faintly. Everyone. The conversation stuck with Elena. She started being more deliberate about what she revealed. She'd nod along in conversations she fully understood, pretending ignorance. She'd ask questions she already knew the answers to, gauging reactions. She was learning to play a different kind of game, and Victor noticed. One evening, he called her into his office. Elena knocked and entered, finding him seated behind his desk, a glass of whiskey in front of him. Sit, he said. She sat. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're doing well. With the training, the language. Thank you. Dimitri sent a message. Elena's stomach tightened. The man from the gala. What did he say? He wants to meet, privately. He mentioned you specifically. Why? Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Because you made an impression. He wants to know if you're an asset or a liability. And what do you think I am? I think you're becoming something I didn't anticipate. Elena wasn't sure how to respond to that. Is that a problem? It could be. Victor took a sip of his drink. Or it could be useful. I haven't decided yet. The honesty caught her off guard. So, what happens with Dmitri? I'll handle it. But you need to understand something. Victor set down his glass and leaned forward. The people in my world don't respect weakness. They respect strength, intelligence, and loyalty. You showed the first two at the gala, but the third is what they'll question. Because you didn't choose this life. You were forced into it. So they'll assume I'll betray you. Eventually, yes. Elena met his gaze. Will I? Victor's eyes narrowed. That's what I'm trying to figure out. The weight of his scrutiny pressed down on her. Elena forced herself to stay calm, to hold his stare. I won't betray you. Not because I'm loyal to you, but because I'm loyal to my family. As long as they're safe, I'll play my part. And if they weren't safe? The question hung in the air like a blade. Elena's throat went dry. Then I'd have nothing to lose. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Good. At least you're honest. He dismissed her with a wave of his hand. Elena stood and walked to the door, her heart pounding. Elena! She turned. Victor was watching her, his expression unreadable. Don't mistake my respect for trust. You haven't earned that yet. I know, she said quietly. She left the office, closing the door behind her, and leaned against the wall for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. This was a test. Everything was a test, and she couldn't afford to fail. The following week, Victor announced they'd be attending another event, this time a private dinner at Dmitri's estate. Elena's stomach dropped when he told her. Why are we going? She asked. Because refusing would signal weakness, and because I need to see what he wants. And what do you need me to do? Victor looked at her, his expression serious. Be yourself. The version you were at the gala. Smart, observant, but don't overplay it. Dmitri is dangerous. He'll use anything you give him. Elena nodded, her mind already spinning through scenarios. The night of the dinner, Elena dressed carefully. A deep navy dress, simple jewelry, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look older. She studied herself in the mirror, trying to see what Victor saw, what Dmitri would see. She didn't look like a scared 20-year-old anymore. She looked like someone who could hold her own. Victor was waiting downstairs, dressed in a dark suit, his expression calm. He glanced at her and nodded once. Let's go. Dmitri's estate was even more extravagant than Victor's. Sprawling gardens, marble statues, a fountain lit up like something out of a movie. The house itself was a monument to wealth and excess. A butler greeted them at the door and led them to a dining room where Dmitri was already seated at the head of a long table. He stood when they entered, his smile sharp. Victor, Elena, welcome. They sat. Dmitri poured wine himself, a gesture that felt deliberate, too casual, too friendly. I'm glad you could make it, Dmitri said, raising his glass. To new alliances. Victor raised his glass but didn't drink. Elena followed his lead. Dmitri chuckled. Still cautious, I see. I suppose that's why you've lasted this long. The dinner began. The food was elaborate, course after course, each more excessive than the last. Elena ate sparingly, her attention divided between the conversation and the room itself. Guards posted at every exit, security cameras in the corners. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a display of power. Dmitri asked questions, polite on the surface, but Elena could hear the calculation underneath. Where was she from? How did she and Victor meet? What did she think of her new life? Elena answered carefully, revealing nothing that mattered, deflecting with questions of her own. She could feel Victor's attention on her, gauging her responses. You've adapted quickly, Dmitri said, leaning back in his chair. Most women in your position would still be struggling. I'm not most women. Dmitri's smile widened. No, I can see that. Tell me, Elena, do you understand the world you've married into? I'm learning. And what have you learned? Elena set down her fork and met his gaze. That everyone wants something, and that trust is a commodity no one can afford. Dmitri laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. Victor, you've found a sharp one. I like her. Victor's expression remained neutral. I'm glad you approve. Approve? Dmitri leaned forward. I'm impressed. Most of the wives in our circles are ornamental, pretty, obedient, silent. But Elena here has a mind. That's rare. It is, Victor agreed. Dimitri's gaze shifted between them, calculating. Tell me, Victor, why her? You could have chosen anyone, someone with connections, with family power. Why a girl with nothing? The question was an insult wrapped in curiosity. Elena's hands clenched under the table. Victor's voice was cold, because she has something the others don't. And what's that? She has nothing to lose. The words hit Elena like a punch. She kept her face neutral, but inside something twisted. He was right. She had nothing, no power, no leverage, just the threat hanging over her family. Dimitri considered this, then nodded slowly. Interesting strategy. A wife who can't betray you because the cost is too high. But what happens when that changes? It won't, Victor said. You sound very certain. I am. The conversation moved on, but Elena barely heard it. Her mind was stuck on Victor's words. She has nothing to lose. It was true. And it was the only reason she was still alive, still useful. But it also meant she was replaceable. After dinner, Dimitri suggested they move to the sitting room for drinks. Elena followed, her nerves on edge. This was taking too long. Whatever Dimitri wanted, he hadn't revealed it yet. They settled into chairs near a fireplace. Dimitri poured vodka, straight, no ice. I'll get to the point, Dimitri said, handing Victor a glass. I have a business opportunity, one that requires discretion and trust. I'm extending the offer to you because we've worked together before, but I need to know you're stable. I am. Are you? Dimitri glanced at Elena. A new wife, a sudden marriage. It raises questions. Victor's expression didn't change. My personal life doesn't affect my business. Doesn't it? Dimitri took a sip of his drink. Forgive me, but I need assurance. This deal is worth 20 million. I can't afford mistakes. What kind of assurance? Dimitri set down his glass and looked directly at Elena. I want to know she's committed, not just to you, but to this life. Because if she's not, she's a risk. And risks have a way of becoming problems. Elena's pulse quickened. This was the real test. Victor's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Elena is my wife. That's all the assurance you need. Is it? Dimitri leaned forward. Then let her speak for herself. Elena, are you committed to this life, to Victor? Or are you just playing a role until you find a way out? The room went silent. Elena felt Victor's eyes on her, along with Dimitri's. She thought about lying, about saying what they wanted to hear. But Irina's advice echoed in her mind. Be careful how much you let them see. I'm here because I have to be, Elena said slowly. My family's safety depends on it. That's not a secret. But I'm also smart enough to know that survival means adaptation. So yes, I'm committed. Not out of love or loyalty, but out of necessity. And in this world, isn't that more reliable than either? Dimitri stared at her, then burst out laughing. Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Victor, she's wasted on you. Victor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Dimitri stood, still chuckling. All right, I'm satisfied. We'll move forward with the deal. I'll have my people send over the details. Victor stood as well. Good. They shook hands. Elena rose, her legs unsteady but holding. As they walked to the car, Victor didn't say a word. Elena could feel the tension radiating off him. She'd said something wrong, or maybe something too right. The drive home was silent. When they arrived, Victor went straight to his office without a word. Elena stood in the foyer, her heart pounding, unsure if she'd just saved herself or condemned herself. She went to her room and changed, her mind replaying the evening over and over. She'd been honest, maybe too honest, but what else could she have said? A knock on the door startled her. Come in, she called. Victor entered. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. That was risky, he said. I know. You could have lied, told him what he wanted to hear. Would you have believed me if I had? Victor was quiet for a moment. No. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. Then what was I supposed to say? Victor walked to the window, staring out at the dark grounds. You told him the truth, that you're here out of necessity, not choice. That makes you predictable. In this world, predictable is safer than loyal. Loyalty can be faked. Necessity can't. So I did the right thing? You did the smart thing. There's a difference. Elena frowned. I don't understand. Victor turned to face her. You've been here almost 3 months. You've learned the language, the fighting, the etiquette. You've played the role well. But tonight you showed them something real, and that makes you more valuable. But it also makes you more vulnerable. Because they know what I care about. Exactly. Elena's stomach sank. My family. Victor nodded. Dmitri now knows your weakness. And if he ever decides to use it against me, he'll go after them first. The weight of that realization crushed down on her. She'd been so focused on surviving, on proving herself, that she hadn't thought about the bigger picture. What do I do? She asked quietly. Victor crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her. You keep doing what you're doing. You get stronger, smarter, you become someone they can't use, and you trust me to protect what matters. Why would you do that? Because, Victor said, his voice low, you're right. Necessity is more reliable than loyalty, and right now, we need each other. Elena looked at him, really looked at him. The exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't invincible. He was just better at hiding it. Okay, she said. I'll trust you. For now. That's all I'm asking. He stood and walked to the door, then paused. You did well tonight, Elena. Better than I expected. Thank you. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Elena sat there for a long time, trying to process everything. She was in deeper than she'd realized, and there was no easy way out. But maybe that was okay. Maybe survival didn't mean escaping. Maybe it meant learning to navigate the storm. The next morning, Elena woke to find a note slipped under her door. It was from Victor, written in his sharp, precise handwriting. Training at 8. Don't be late. She smiled despite herself. Alexei was waiting for her in the gym, but this time he wasn't alone. Another man stood beside him, younger, faster, with a boxer's build. This is Konstantin, Alexei said. He'll be your sparring partner from now on. Elena glanced at Victor, who was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. You've learned the basics, Victor said. Now you need to learn how to apply them under pressure. Konstantin didn't give her time to prepare. He came at her fast, throwing punches that forced her to move, to think, to react. Elena blocked, dodged, countered. She took hits, hard ones. But she didn't go down. 15 minutes in, she was gasping for air, her body screaming, but she didn't stop. Enough, Alexei finally called. Elena bent over, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. Konstantin offered her a water bottle. She took it, nodding her thanks. Victor pushed off this wall and walked over. Better. Just better? A faint smile tugged at his mouth. You're still standing. That's more than most people manage against Konstantin on their first round. Konstantin grinned. She's tough. I'll give her that. Elena straightened, wiping sweat from her face. When's the next session? Victor's smile widened slightly. Tomorrow. Same time. Over the following weeks, the training intensified. Elena learned to fight dirty, eye strikes, throat jabs, pressure points. Alexei taught her how to use her size as an advantage, how to move faster, strike harder. Konstantin pushed her past her limits, then past those limits again. And through it all, Victor watched. He started giving her assignments. Small things at first, attend a meeting and report back what you observed. Listen to this conversation and tell me who's lying. Read this contract and find the loopholes. Elena threw herself into it. She learned to read people the way she'd learned to read punches, by watching their tells, their hesitations, their mistakes. One evening, Victor called her into his office and handed her a file. What's this? She asked. A test. Elena opened the file. Inside were documents, financial statements, contracts, communications, all in the language she'd been learning. I need you to analyze this, Victor said. Tell me what you see. Elena spent the next 2 hours going through the file, taking notes, cross-referencing information. When she was done, she handed her analysis to Victor. He read it in silence, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up. You found the discrepancy. The offshore account. Someone's been skimming. Victor nodded slowly. It took my accountant 3 weeks to find that. You found it in 2 hours. Elena wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a concern. What happens now? Now I deal with the person responsible. And you've just proven you're more than capable of handling real work. From that point on, Victor started including her in more. She sat in on meetings, not as decoration, but as an observer. He'd ask her opinion afterward, testing her judgment. She learned the names of his associates, his enemies, his allies. She learned how deals were made and broken. And slowly, the dynamic between them shifted. They started talking. Real conversations, not just instructions and reports. Victor told her about his childhood, growing up in a world where weakness meant death, where trust was a luxury no one could afford. He didn't share everything, but he shared enough that Elena started to see him differently. Not as a monster, not as a savior, just as a man trying to survive in a world that wanted to destroy him. And Elena told him things too, about her family, her father's drinking, her mother's quiet desperation, her brother's dreams of college that would probably never happen. She didn't tell him everything either, but she told him enough. One night, about 4 months after their wedding, they were sitting in the library. Victor was reviewing contracts. Elena was reading, a novel in the language she'd been learning, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You're getting better," Victor said without looking up. Elena glanced at him. "At reading?" "At everything." She set down the book. "Is that a good thing?" Victor finally looked at her. "It's necessary." That's not an answer. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You're not the same person I married 4 months ago." "Neither are you." Victor's eyebrow raised slightly. "How so?" Elena chose her words carefully. "You're less guarded, not by much, but enough that I notice." "And why do you think that is?" "Because I'm not a threat anymore. Or maybe because you've decided I'm worth the risk." Victor was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe both." The admission hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Elena's pulse quickened. This was new territory, uncharted. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Victor stood, walking to the window. "That depends on you." "On me?" He turned to face her. "You've proven yourself capable, intelligent, strong, but there's still a choice you haven't made." "What choice?" Victor crossed the room, stopping a few feet from where she sat. "Whether you want to stay in this world, or whether you're still just surviving until you can leave." Elena's breath caught. "I can't leave. My family." "Your family is safe. I've made sure of that. The debt is paid. They're protected. You could leave tomorrow if you wanted to." The words hit her like a slap. "What?" "The debt was settled 2 months ago. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see what you'd do. Whether you'd stay because you had to or because you chose to." Elena stood, her mind reeling. "You've been lying to me for 2 months? I've been testing you." Anger flared in her chest. "Testing me? You bastard! You let me think. I let you think exactly what you needed to think to survive. And you did. You're still here. Because I thought I had to be. And now you don't." Victor's voice was calm, maddeningly calm. "So what are you going to do?" Elena stared at him, her hands shaking. She could leave. Right now. Pack her bags and go. Her family was safe. She didn't owe Victor anything. But even as the thought formed, she knew it wasn't that simple. She'd spent 4 months learning this world, building skills, proving herself. She'd become someone different, someone stronger. And Victor, damn him, had seen that, had pushed her to become that person. "I hate you right now," she said quietly. "I know. You manipulated me." "Yes. And you don't even feel bad about it." Victor's expression softened slightly. "I do, actually. But I needed to know if you'd stay by choice. Because if you're going to be part of this world, it has to be your decision, not mine." Elena closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. "Why does it matter?" "Because I'm asking you to stay. Not as someone I own, but as someone I choose to have beside me." She opened her eyes. Victor was watching her, his guard down in a way she'd never seen before. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying this started as a transaction, but it doesn't have to stay that way. You've proven you belong here, and I want you to stay. Not because you have to, but because you want to." Elena's heart was racing. This was insane, all of it, But somehow, standing there in that library, looking at Viktor Sokolov, the man who'd bought her, controlled her, pushed her, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to leave. Not because she loved him. She wasn't sure she even liked him most days. But because she'd found something here. Power, purpose. A version of herself she never knew existed. "If I stay," she said slowly, "it's on my terms." "What terms?" "I'm not your property. I'm your partner, equal. You don't make decisions about my life without me, and you sure as hell don't lie to me again." Victor's mouth curved into a smile, a real one. "Deal." He held out his hand. Elena stared at it for a moment, then took it. They shook, and something between them clicked into place. Not love, not yet, but something that could become it, or something just as dangerous. The handshake lasted longer than it should have. Elena felt the warmth of Victor's palm, the calluses she hadn't noticed before, the steadiness of his grip. When she pulled away, something in the air between them had changed, settled into place like a foundation finally poured. "So what now?" she asked. Victor walked back to his desk, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Elena. She took it, even though she'd never been much of a drinker. "Now," he said, raising his glass, "we figure out what kind of partnership this is going to be." They drank. The whiskey burned going down, but Elena welcomed it. Proof that this moment was real. Over the next few weeks, Victor kept his word. He started including her in decisions, real ones, not just tests. When a shipment deal went south, he asked her opinion on how to handle it. When a rival family made overtures about a potential alliance, he wanted her assessment of their intentions. Elena threw herself into it. She studied the players in Victor's world like she was preparing for an exam. She learned who owed what to whom, which alliances were solid, and which were held together by nothing but fear. She sat in on meetings where men twice her age talked about millions of dollars like it was pocket change, and she listened, cataloging every word. But she also pushed back when she disagreed. And Victor, to her surprise, listened. "You're making a mistake," she said one evening, after he'd outlined a plan to cut ties with a supplier who'd been skimming product. Victor looked up from the contract he was reviewing. "Explain." "If you cut him off completely, he'll go to your competitors. He knows too much about your distribution network. Better to keep him close, reduce his access gradually, make him think he's still valuable while you build a replacement pipeline." Victor considered this. That takes time. Less time than rebuilding from scratch, after he sells everything he knows to Dmitri or whoever else will pay. A slow smile spread across Victor's face. "You're learning to think like them." "Like you," Elena corrected. "Is there a difference?" She didn't answer that. Victor took her advice. The supplier stayed on, his role slowly diminished, his access carefully managed. 6 weeks later, when Victor had a new pipeline in place, the man was let go with a generous severance and a very clear understanding of what would happen if he talked. "You were right," Victor told her that night. Elena was sitting in the library, working through a stack of financial reports he'd given her to review. She looked up. "About what?" "The supplier. Your way was better." "I know." Victor laughed, an actual laugh, not the cold amusement she'd seen him show others. It changed his whole face, made him look younger. Human. "You're getting cocky," he said. "I'm getting good." Same thing in this world. Elena set down her pen. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why me? And don't give me the nothing-to-lose speech. There had to be other options." Victor sat down across from her, his expression thoughtful. "Do you want the honest answer?" "That's why I'm asking." "I was tired," he said simply. "Tired of the games, the politics, the constant calculation. Everyone in this world wants something from me. Power, money, protection, access. They smile and shake my hand and plot behind my back. I needed someone who didn't want any of that. Someone who'd tell me the truth because they had no reason to lie." "And you thought a girl you bought from her desperate father would be honest?" "I thought desperation makes people predictable. And I was right. You've been honest from the start because you couldn't afford not to be." Elena wasn't sure whether to be offended or impressed by the logic. "And now that I could leave, but I'm choosing to stay? Now I'm curious to see what you'll become." The answer should have bothered her, should have felt like she was still just an experiment, a project. But there was something in the way he said it, not coldly, but with genuine interest that made it feel different. "What do you want me to become?" she asked. Victor leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Someone who can stand beside me. Not behind me, not in my shadow. Beside me." The weight of that statement settled over Elena. It was more than she'd expected, more than she was sure she could handle, but she'd never been good at backing down from a challenge. "Then you better keep up," she said. Victor's smile was sharp. "I was about to say the same thing to you." 2 months later, on a cold morning in early spring, Elena woke up feeling wrong. She couldn't pinpoint it at first, just a vague nausea, a bone-deep exhaustion that coffee couldn't touch. She pushed through her morning training, but halfway through her session with Constantine, she had to stop and sit down. "You okay?" Constantine asked, concerned. "Fine, just tired." But she wasn't fine. Over the next week, the symptoms got worse. The nausea came in waves. Smells that had never bothered her before, coffee, cologne, even the soap in the bathroom, made her stomach turn. She was exhausted all the time, falling asleep on the couch in the middle of the day. Katya noticed first. "You should see a doctor," she said one morning, finding Elena hunched over the kitchen sink, trying not to vomit. "I'm fine." "You're not, and I know what this looks like." Elena looked up, meeting Katya's knowing gaze. Her stomach dropped, and it had nothing to do with the nausea. "No," she said. "That's not... We haven't..." But even as she said it, her mind was racing back. The night of their 6-month anniversary. Victor had taken her to dinner at a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a name, just an address. They'd drunk too much wine, talked too openly, and when they'd gotten home, the careful distance they'd maintained had finally, inevitably, crumbled. It had happened twice more after that. Not frequently, but enough. Elena's hands were shaking. "I need to take a test." Katya nodded. "I'll get one. Wait here." 20 minutes later, Elena was locked in her bathroom, staring at a plastic stick that held her entire future in its tiny window. Pregnant. The word felt impossible. Foreign. Wrong. But the test didn't lie. Neither did the second one. Or the third. Elena sat on the bathroom floor, her back against the tub, trying to process. She was pregnant. With Victor's child. The man she'd been sold to, fought with, learned from, and somewhere along the way, started to care about in ways that terrified her. A knock on the door made her jump. "Elena?" Victor's voice, concerned. "Katya said you were sick. Can I come in?" Elena scrambled to her feet, shoving the tests into the trash and covering them with tissues. "I'm fine, just give me a minute. I'm coming in." The door opened before she could protest. Victor took one look at her face, pale, shaken, and crossed the room in 2 strides. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I told you. I'm fine." His eyes narrowed. He glanced at the trash can, then back at her. Elena's heart stopped. Victor reached down and pulled out one of the tests. The silence that followed was crushing. He stared at the test for a long moment, his expression completely unreadable. Then he looked at Elena. "Is this real?" His voice was carefully controlled. Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Victor set the test down on the counter with deliberate care. "How long have you known?" 5 minutes? He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. Elena couldn't read him, couldn't tell if he was angry, scared, pleased, or something else entirely. "Say something," she whispered. Victor looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely uncertain. "I don't know what to say." "Neither do I." They stood there in the bathroom, the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them. "Is this..." Victor started, then stopped. "Do you want this?" The question caught Elena off guard. She hadn't even gotten that far in her own thinking. Did she want this? A baby? In this world? With him? "I don't know," she said honestly. "I never thought... We weren't trying to..." "I know." "Victor, I can't... I don't know how to do this." He stepped closer, his hands finding her shoulders. "Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. How can you be so calm?" "I'm not." He let out a short laugh. "I'm terrified, but panic won't help either of us." Elena's eyes stung. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. "What do we do?" "First you see a doctor. Make sure everything's okay. Then we make a plan. A plan for what? Victor's hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. For keeping you both safe. Because if word gets out that you're pregnant, you become a target, and I can't let that happen. The reality of that hit her hard. She wasn't just carrying a baby. She was carrying Viktor Sokolov's heir. In a world where power was everything and enemies were everywhere, that made her the most valuable and vulnerable person in his life. This changes everything, she said quietly. Yes, Viktor agreed. It does. The doctor came to the house. A woman named Dr. Volkov, who asked no questions and offered no judgments. She examined Elena, took blood samples, and confirmed what the tests had already shown. 8 weeks along. Healthy. Everything progressing normally. Elena lay in bed that night, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, trying to wrap her mind around it. There was a life growing inside her, a tiny collection of cells that would become a person. Her child. Victor's child. Their child. The door opened quietly. Viktor stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. Can I come in? He asked. Elena nodded. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. They'd been sleeping in separate rooms again since she'd started feeling sick. Her choice, not his. But right now, she was grateful for his presence. How are you feeling? He asked. Overwhelmed. That's fair. Elena turned to look at him. Are you happy about this? Viktor was quiet for a moment. I never thought I'd have children. In this world, family is either a weakness or a weapon. I watched my father use my mother as both. I swore I'd never put anyone in that position. And now? Now I'm realizing I don't have a choice. This child exists, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect them. And you. Elena's throat tightened. What if I'm not ready for this? Viktor reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm, steady. Then we'll figure it out together, same as everything else. It wasn't a declaration of love. Wasn't even close. But it was honest, and right now, that meant more than any pretty words could have. Okay, Elena whispered. Okay. He started to stand, but Elena held on to his hand. Stay. Just for tonight. Viktor hesitated, then nodded. He lay down on top of the covers, fully dressed, keeping a careful distance. But his hand stayed in hers, and for the first time in weeks, Elena slept soundly. The pregnancy changed things in ways Elena hadn't anticipated. Viktor became hypervigilant. Extra guards were posted, security cameras were upgraded. Elena wasn't allowed to leave the estate without a full security detail. It was suffocating, but she understood. She was carrying something precious now, something that made her a target, but it also gave her a strange kind of power. At meetings, when men dismissed her opinions or talked over her, Viktor would cut them off. My wife is speaking. You'll listen. And they did. Because she wasn't just Viktor's wife anymore. She was the mother of his child. And that meant something in this world. Elena's body changed. Her stomach started to swell, subtle at first, then unmistakable. She felt the baby move for the first time at 16 weeks, a flutter like butterfly wings. She was in the library when it happened, and she gasped out loud. Viktor looked up from his desk. What's wrong? Nothing. I felt it. The baby. He was across the room in seconds. Can I? Elena took his hand and placed it on her stomach. They waited. Nothing happened. It's probably too early for you to feel from the outside, she said. But Viktor kept his hand there anyway, his expression intent, waiting. And then it happened, a tiny bump against his palm. Viktor's eyes widened. He looked at Elena, something raw and unguarded in his expression. That's our baby. He knelt down, his hand still pressed to her stomach, his forehead resting against her side. Elena's breath caught. She'd never seen him like this. Vulnerable. Open. She ran her fingers through his hair, and he didn't pull away. They stayed like that for a long time. As the pregnancy progressed, Elena started thinking about the future. Not just survival, but actually living, raising a child, teaching them, protecting them, giving them choices. I want them to have options, she told Viktor one evening. They were in the nursery, a room that had been converted from a guest bedroom, now painted soft gray with a crib Viktor had insisted on assembling himself. What kind of options? He asked, tightening a bolt. The kind I never had. The kind you didn't have. I want them to be able to choose their own life, not have it forced on them. Victor set down the screwdriver and looked at her. In this world, choice is a luxury. Then maybe we change the world they're growing up in. That's not realistic. Why not? Victor stood, crossing to where she sat in the rocking chair by the window. Because I've spent my entire life building this empire. It's who I am, what I know. I can't just walk away. I'm not asking you to walk away. I'm asking you to think about what kind of father you want to be, what kind of legacy you want to leave. Victor's jaw tightened. I'm trying to give them safety, security, power. What about peace? The word hung between them. There is no peace in this world, Victor said quietly. Then maybe we make one. Victor looked at her for a long moment, then knelt down beside the chair. His hand found her swollen belly, resting there gently. I'll try, he said. I don't know if I can, but I'll try. It was more than she'd expected, more than she'd hoped for. That's enough, she whispered. At 7 months, Elena woke in the middle of the night to raised voices downstairs. She sat up carefully, her back aching, her heart pounding. Something was wrong. She pulled on a robe and made her way downstairs as quickly as her pregnant body would allow. The voices were coming from Victor's office. She could hear him, sharp and angry, and at least 2 other men responding. Elena pushed open the door. Victor looked up, his expression dark. Elena, go back to bed. What's happening? Nothing you need to worry about. But one of the men, someone she recognized from previous meetings, was bleeding from a cut above his eye. The other looked terrified. Tell me what's happening, Elena said, her voice harder. Victor's jaw clenched. There was an attack on one of our shipments. 3 men dead. The product's gone. Elena's hand instinctively went to her stomach. Who did it? We're trying to figure that out. Dmitri, the bleeding man said. Had to be. He's been circling for months. Victor's expression went cold. We don't know that. Who else would be bold enough? Elena's mind was racing. What does this mean? Victor crossed to her, his hands gentle on her arms. It means I need to handle this, and you need to go upstairs where it's safe. Victor, please. His voice was quiet but urgent. I need to know you're safe, both of you. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to stay, to help, to be part of solving this. But the fear in his eyes, real, raw fear, stopped her. Okay, she said, but you tell me everything later. I will. She went back upstairs, but she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the grounds, watching the extra guards that materialized from nowhere, watching the cars that came and went through the night. Victor didn't come to bed. In the morning, she found him in his office, still in yesterday's clothes, his eyes bloodshot. Did you sleep at all? She asked. No. Elena crossed to him, taking the coffee cup from his hands and setting it aside. Talk to me. It was Dmitri. We have proof now. He's making a move. What kind of move? The kind that starts a war. Elena's blood ran cold. What are you going to do? Victor looked at her, and she saw the weight of every decision he'd ever made carved into his face. I'm going to end this, before it gets worse, before it touches you or our child. How? You don't want to know. Yes, I do. Victor stood pacing to the window. I'm going to meet with him, one final time. Make it clear that if he comes after what's mine again, I won't show mercy. And if he doesn't listen? Victor didn't answer. He didn't have to. Elena crossed to him, placing her hand over his. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. He knows about me, about the baby. If you go alone, I'm the weakness he'll exploit later. But if I'm there, if he sees I'm not some helpless girl hiding behind you, it changes the calculation. It's too dangerous. Everything about this life is dangerous. At least let me be part of protecting it. Victor turned to face her fully. Elena, I'm not asking permission, she said firmly. I'm telling you, we're partners, remember? That means I get a say in this. Victor stared at her, conflict warring in his expression. Finally, he exhaled. You stay in the car, guarded. You don't come inside unless I say so. Fine. And if anything goes wrong, anything, you leave. You don't wait for me. You get yourself and our baby somewhere safe. Victor, that's the deal. Take it or I lock you in this house and double the guards. Elena knew he'd do it. Okay, I agree. The meeting was set for the following evening at neutral ground, a warehouse on the edge of the city. Elena dressed carefully, wearing black, her hair pulled back. She looked like someone who belonged in this world now, not the scared 20-year-old who'd arrived in a cab 8 months ago. The drive was tense. Victor sat beside her, his hand resting on her knee, his thumb tracing absent circles. A comfort gesture, though Elena wasn't sure if he was comforting her or himself. Whatever happens, he said quietly, know that I... He stopped, started again. You and the baby. You're everything. You understand that? Elena's heart clenched. I understand. The warehouse came into view. Cars were already there, Dimitri's people. Victor's men surrounded their vehicle. Victor turned to Elena. Remember, you stay here. I remember. He kissed her forehead, quick, fierce, then stepped out of the car. Elena watched him walk toward the warehouse, flanked by his men, his posture radiating controlled danger. She pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the baby kick in response. Your father's going to handle this, she whispered, and we're going to be fine. She hoped she wasn't lying. Inside the warehouse, Victor faced Dimitri across a floor stained with years of industrial grime. You attacked my shipment, Victor said. No preamble, no pleasantries. Dimitri smiled. Did I? Don't play games. We both know it was you. Perhaps I was sending a message. Then let me send one back. Victor's voice dropped to something deadly. Touch what's mine again, and I'll burn your entire organization to the ground, starting with you. Dimitri's smile didn't waver. Bold words. But you're vulnerable now, Victor. A pregnant wife, that's a weakness waiting to be exploited. She's not a weakness, she's a reason. A reason for what? A reason to show no mercy when someone threatens what I'm building. Dimitri's expression shifted slightly. What you're building? You mean a family? How quaint. How soft. Careful, Victor warned. Or what? You'll kill me? Here? Now? That would start a war you can't afford. I can afford any war. The question is, can you? The tension in the warehouse was suffocating. Both sides had their hands near weapons. One wrong move, and this would explode. Dimitri studied Victor for a long moment. You've changed. The Victor Sokolov I knew a year ago wouldn't have hesitated. He would have already ended me for what I did. Maybe I've changed. That's what I was afraid of. Dimitri stepped forward. So, here's my offer. You give me half your territory. I leave you, your wife, and your child alone. You get to play house. I get what I want. Everyone wins. Victor laughed, cold and humorless. You think I'd give up half my empire for peace? I think you do it for her, for that baby, because you're not the man you used to be, and we both know it. Victor's hands clenched at his sides. Everything in him wanted to refuse, to fight, to prove that he hadn't gone soft. But then he thought of Elena, of the baby, of the future they were trying to build. No deal, he said finally. But I'll offer you this. Walk away now, tonight. Leave my operations alone, and I won't retaliate for the attack. We go our separate ways. And if I refuse, then you'll find out exactly how much I haven't changed. Dimitri considered this. The warehouse was silent except for the sound of breathing, the creak of leather as men shifted their weight. Finally, Dimitri nodded. You've got yourself a truce. For now. But Victor, the moment you show real weakness, the moment that baby makes you too soft to do what needs to be done, I'll be there. And I won't be offering deals. I'll remember that. They didn't shake hands, didn't exchange pleasantries, just turned and walked away, both sides retreating to their respective vehicles. Victor climbed back into the car beside Elena. She could see the tension radiating off him. What happened? She asked. We have a truce. Temporary. That's good, isn't it? Victor looked at her, his expression conflicted. He called you a weakness, said I've gone soft. Have you? I don't know anymore. Elena reached for his hand. Maybe soft isn't the right word. Maybe you're just figuring out what's worth protecting and what you're willing to sacrifice for it. Victor pulled her close, his hand cradling the back of her head. I almost gave him half my territory, right there, because he's right. I would do anything to keep you both safe. But But you didn't give it to him. No. But I wanted to, and that scares me more than any threat he could make. Elena understood. Victor had spent his whole life building walls, protecting himself, making sure nothing could hurt him. And now he had something that could. Someone who mattered more than power or territory or pride. He had her. And their baby. And that changed everything. The truce with Dmitri held for exactly 3 weeks. Elena was in the nursery, folding tiny clothes that still seemed impossibly small, when she heard the first gunshot. The sound cracked through the afternoon quiet like breaking glass. She froze, a onesie clutched in her hands, her heart hammering against her ribs. More shots, rapid fire, shouting. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her panic. Elena dropped the clothes and moved as fast as her 8 months pregnant body would allow, heading for the door. But it burst open before she reached it. Alexei, blood streaking down his arm. We need to move, now! What's happening? Dmitri, he's hitting us. The whole estate is under attack. Elena's vision swam. She gripped the doorframe. Where's Victor? Dealing with it. But he said if anything happened, I get you out first, so let's go. I'm not leaving him. You don't have a choice. Alexei grabbed her arm, not roughly but firmly. There's a car waiting at the east entrance. Katya's already there. We move now or we don't move at all. Another explosion, closer this time. The windows rattled. Elena's hand went to her stomach protectively. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Alexei led her down the back staircase, the one the staff used. Elena could hear gunfire from multiple directions now, men shouting in languages she'd learned to understand. Her feet felt clumsy on the stairs, her center of gravity all wrong. They reached the ground floor. Through a window, Elena saw Victor's men taking cover behind cars, returning fire at shapes moving through the gardens. Smoke was rising from somewhere near the front gate. Don't look, Alexei said, pulling her forward. They made it to the east entrance. A black SUV was idling, rear door open. Katya was in the back seat, her face pale but composed. Get in, Alexei ordered. Elena climbed in awkwardly, Katya helping her. Alexei slammed the door and hit the roof twice. The driver punched the gas. Elena twisted in her seat, looking back at the mansion. Flames were visible now, licking up one side of the building. Men were everywhere, fighting, falling, running. And somewhere in that chaos was Victor. We can't just leave him, Elena said, her voice breaking. Katya took her hand. He can handle himself. He's done it before, but he can't handle it and worry about you at the same time. Where are we going? Safe house, 3 hours north. Victor will meet us there when it's done. If he survives, Elena thought, but didn't say. The drive was endless. Elena sat in silence, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the door handle so hard her knuckles went white. Every bump in the road sent a jolt through her body. The baby was restless, moving constantly, as if picking up on her fear. Her phone buzzed. Elena grabbed it, hope surging. But it wasn't Victor. It was a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her. Hello? Elena. Dmitri's voice smooth and cold. I hope you're somewhere safe. Her blood turned to ice. How did you get this number? I have resources. You should know that by now. What do you want? To give you a message for your husband. Tell him this is what happens when he refuses a reasonable offer. Tell him I'll keep taking pieces of his empire until there's nothing left. And then I'll take what matters most. Elena's free hand clenched into a fist. You won't touch me or my child. Won't I? You're in a car right now heading north. Black SUV, 3 occupants. Should I continue? Elena's stomach dropped. She looked out the window, scanning for other vehicles. There, 2 cars back, a dark sedan keeping pace. You're following us. I'm making a point. I could end this right now. 1 call, and that car behind you opens fire. But I'm not going to do that. Not yet. Because I want Victor to suffer first. I want him to know what's coming and be powerless to stop it. You're insane. I'm thorough. There's a difference. Tell Victor I'll be in touch. The line went dead. Elena's hands were shaking. Alexei, she called to the front seat. We're being followed. Dmitri's people. 2 cars back. Alexei cursed, looked in the rearview mirror. Ivan, we need to lose them. Now. The driver nodded, his expression grim. He yanked the wheel right, taking a side road at a speed that made Elena grab for the handle again. The SUV fishtailed slightly before the tires found grip. Behind them, the sedan followed. "They're not going to let us go," Elena said. "Then we make them regret following us," Alexei replied, pulling a gun from inside his jacket. He rolled down the window. "Wait," Elena said. "Dmitri said he wasn't going to kill us yet. He's just making a point. You believe him?" "No, but if he wanted us dead right now, we'd already be dead. He has the resources. This is a game to him." Alexei hesitated, then rolled the window back up. "So what do we do?" Elena's mind raced. "Think. Use what you've learned. Call Victor. Tell him we're being followed, but they're not engaging. Ask him what he wants us to do." Alexei made the call. The conversation was brief, tense. When he hung up, his expression was dark. "Boss says keep driving. Don't engage unless they fire first. He's sending backup to intercept." "Is he okay?" Elena asked. "He's alive. That's all I know." It was enough. It had to be. They drove for another hour, the sedan maintaining its distance. Elena watched it in the side mirror, her jaw clenched. Every mile felt like a countdown to something inevitable. Then two more vehicles appeared, Victor's men, flanking the sedan from both sides. There was a tense moment where it looked like it might turn into a highway shootout. But the sedan slowed, then took an exit, disappearing. Elena exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. The safe house was a cabin in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees and silence. Two of Victor's men were already there, securing the perimeter. Alexei helped Elena inside while Katya brought in bags that had apparently been packed ahead of time. "How long are we staying here?" Elena asked. "As long as it takes," Alexei replied. Elena sank onto the couch, her entire body aching. The baby was still moving, restless kicks that bordered on painful. She pressed her hands to her stomach, trying to breathe through the anxiety. "He's okay," she whispered to herself. "He has to be okay." Katya brought her water. "Drink. You need to stay hydrated." Elena drank mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She kept seeing the mansion on fire, hearing the gunshots, imagining Victor in the middle of it all. He'd survived this kind of thing before. He'd told her stories about past attacks, close calls, moments where everything hung by a thread. But this felt different. This felt personal. Her phone rang. Victor's name on the screen. She answered before the first ring finished. "Are you alive?" "Yes." His voice was rough, exhausted. "Are you safe?" "We're at the safe house." "Victor, what happened?" "Dmitri brought an army. 40 men, maybe more. We held them off, but the house is destroyed. 3 of my men are dead. 6 wounded." Elena's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault." "Dmitri called me. He was following us. He said this is just the beginning." Victor was quiet for a moment. "I know. He called me too. Made demands." "What kind of demands?" "The kind I won't meet. Elena, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You need to stay at the safe house until I come get you, no matter how long it takes. Don't trust anyone except Alexei and Katya. Don't answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. And if anything feels wrong, you run. You understand? I'm not running without you." "Elena, no. We're partners, remember? We face this together." Victor's exhale was heavy. "You're carrying our child. That makes you the priority, not me. And you're the father of that child. So you're a priority too." Stubborn woman. "You knew what you were getting into when you married me." A faint sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes, I did. Look, I'm cleaning up here, making sure the perimeter is secure. Then I'm coming to you. Should be there by morning. Promise?" "I promise." Elena closed her eyes. "Be careful. Always." After he hung up, Elena sat there holding the phone, trying to convince herself that everything would be fine, that Victor would show up in the morning, that this would end, that they'd figure out a way forward. But deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't going to end cleanly. Dmitri had shown his hand, and Victor would have to respond. The question was how far he'd be willing to go. Elena woke the next morning to the sound of cars pulling up outside. She struggled to her feet, her back screaming in protest, and moved to the window. 3 vehicles. Victor climbed out of the first one, looking like he'd been through a war, which, she supposed, he had. She met him at the door. He looked at her for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms, carefully, mindful of her stomach, but tight enough that she felt the tension in every muscle. "You're okay," he said against her hair. "So are you." They stood there for a moment, just holding each other. Then Victor pulled back, his hands moving to her face. He studied her like he was memorizing every detail. "We need to talk," he said. They sat in the cabin's small kitchen. Victor looked worse in the daylight, bruises forming, a cut above his eyebrow, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. "Dmitri isn't going to stop," he said without preamble. "Yesterday was a message. Next time will be worse. So what do we do?" Victor's jaw tightened. "I end this. Permanently." Elena's stomach clenched. "You mean kill him?" "Yes." She'd known it was coming. In this world, there weren't many other options. But hearing Victor say it out loud made it real. "When?" she asked. "Soon. I'm meeting with my people this afternoon to plan it. But Elena, there's something else you need to know." "What?" "If I do this, there will be consequences. Dmitri has allies, people who will retaliate. This could start a war that lasts years. Or it could end one before it really begins." Victor looked at her, something like pride in his expression. "You've learned to think like them." "Like us," Elena corrected. "I'm part of this world now, for better or worse." "I never wanted this for you." "I know, but it's where we are, so we deal with it." Victor reached across the table, taking her hand. "I'm going to keep you safe, whatever it takes." "I know you will, but you need to keep yourself safe, too. Because this baby needs a father, and I—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "You what?" Elena met his eyes. "I need you. I know that's not what this started as. I know it was supposed to be transactional. But somewhere along the way it became real, at least for me." Victor's grip on her hand tightened. "For me too." It wasn't a declaration of love. They were both too guarded, too damaged for that. But it was truth. And right now, that mattered more. The meeting that afternoon was tense. Victor's top men gathered in the cabin's small living room, weapons on the table, maps spread out, voices low and serious. Elena stayed in the bedroom, the door cracked open so she could hear. She caught fragments, entry points, security rotations, backup plans. They were planning an assassination, methodical, precise, and dangerous as hell. When the meeting ended, the men filed out. Victor stayed behind, staring at the maps like they held answers he couldn't find. Elena came out of the bedroom. "When are you doing it?" "Tomorrow night. Dmitri's hosting a dinner at his estate. Low security because it's supposed to be a social event. We hit him there." "That's risky." "It's the best chance we'll get." Elena crossed to him, her hand finding his shoulder. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to stay here, safe, away from all of this." "Victor, please." He turned to face her, and she saw the fear there, raw and undisguised. "I can do this if I know you're safe, but if I'm worrying about you, if I'm distracted, I'll make mistakes. And mistakes get people killed." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could help, could be useful. But she saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't about control or keeping her in the dark. This was about him being able to focus on staying alive. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll stay here, but you come back to me. You hear me? You finish this and you come back." Victor pulled her close, his hand cradling the back of her head. "I will. I promise." That night, they lay in bed together, really together, for the first time in weeks. Victor's hand rested on her stomach, feeling the baby move. Elena ran her fingers through his hair, trying to memorize the feel of him. "What do you think it is?" Victor asked quietly. "Boy or girl?" "I don't know. Does it matter?" "No, as long as they're healthy." Elena smiled. "What kind of father do you think you'll be?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. "Probably terrible. I don't know how to do this. How to be soft or gentle or any of the things children need. You're gentler than you think. With you, maybe. But that's different." "Why?" "Because you fought for your place here. You earned my respect. A child doesn't have to do that. They just exist. And that terrifies me." Elena turned to face him. "You know what I think? I think you're going to love this baby so fiercely that all the other stuff will figure itself out. You won't be perfect. Neither will I. But we'll try. And that's enough. Victor kissed her forehead. When did you get so wise? When I married a man who forced me to grow up fast. I'm sorry for that. I'm not. Not anymore. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, holding on like the world was trying to pull them apart, because it was. The next evening, Elena watched Victor prepare. He dressed in all black, checked his weapons with the kind of practiced efficiency that should have been frightening but wasn't. This was who he was, what he'd been trained to do. Be smart, she told him at the door. Not brave, smart. Victor smiled faintly. I'll do my best. That's all I'm asking. He kissed her, long and deep, like he was trying to say everything he didn't have words for. Then he was gone. Elena stood at the window watching the taillights disappear into the darkness. Katya came to stand beside her. He'll be fine, Katya said. I've seen him survive worse. Have you? Yes, many times. He's careful, calculated. He doesn't take unnecessary risks. Elena wanted to believe that, but she'd also seen the look in his eyes when he talked about ending Dmitri. There was anger there, personal fury, and that made people reckless. Hours passed. Elena tried to distract herself, reading, pacing, organizing things that didn't need organizing. The baby was active tonight, rolling and kicking like they knew something was happening. Your father's going to be fine, Elena whispered to her stomach. He has to be. Midnight came and went. Then 1 in the morning, 2. Elena's phone rang at 2:47 a.m. Her heart stopped. She grabbed it, saw Alexei's name. What happened? She demanded. It's done. Dmitri's dead. But Elena, Victor's hurt. The world tilted. How bad? Bad enough. He took 2 bullets. We're bringing him to you now. Dr. Volkov is already on her way. Is he going to... Elena couldn't finish the sentence. I don't know. He's conscious, talking, but there's a lot of blood. Elena's hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. How long until you get here? 20 minutes? Maybe less. Okay, just keep him alive, please. We're trying. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Elena's life. She paced the cabin, her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Katya tried to get her to sit down, to stay calm for the baby's sake, but Elena couldn't. If Victor died, if he didn't make it, she couldn't finish that thought either. Headlights appeared. Elena was out the door before the cars fully stopped. They were carrying Victor. His shirt was soaked with blood, his face pale, but his eyes were open. He saw her and tried to smile. Told you I'd come back, he managed. You idiot, Elena said, tears streaming down her face. You absolute idiot. They got him inside, laid him on the kitchen table. Dr. Volkov arrived minutes later, already barking orders. Elena was pushed aside, told to wait in the other room. She couldn't watch, couldn't breathe. She sank onto the couch, her hands pressed to her stomach, and prayed to anything that might be listening. The surgery took hours. Elena sat frozen, listening to the muffled sounds from the kitchen. At one point, she heard Victor cry out in pain and had to bite down on her fist to keep from running to him. Finally, Dr. Volkov emerged. She was covered in blood, exhausted, but her expression was calm. He'll live, she said. One bullet went through his shoulder, clean, the other lodged near his ribs. I got it out, stopped the bleeding. He needs rest and antibiotics, but he'll recover. Elena's knees went weak. She would have fallen if Katya hadn't caught her. Can I see him? She whispered. Yes, but he's sedated. He probably won't wake up for a few hours. Elena didn't care. She went into the kitchen where Victor lay on the table, now covered with clean sheets, bandages wrapped around his torso and shoulder. His breathing was steady, his face peaceful. She pulled a chair beside him and took his hand. You came back, she whispered. You stubborn, reckless man. You came back. She sat there all night, holding his hand, feeling the steady beat of his pulse against her fingers. Proof that he was alive, that they'd survived this. As dawn broke, Victor's eyes finally opened. He looked at her, disoriented. Hey, he said, his voice rough. Hey yourself. Did we win? Elena laughed through her tears. You're asking me if you won while you're lying here shot twice? I need to know if it worked. Dimitri's dead. Your men are saying it was clean. No witnesses. His allies are scattered. Victor closed his eyes, relief washing over his face. Good. That's good. You could have died. But I didn't. Victor, I know. I'm sorry. But it's over now. We're safe. Elena wanted to yell at him, wanted to tell him how terrified she'd been, how she'd imagined a future without him and couldn't breathe through the panic. But instead, she leaned down and kissed him gently. Don't ever do that to me again, she whispered. I'll try. Not good enough. Victor's hand came up to cup her face. Then I promise. No more unnecessary risks. Not now. Not with you and the baby depending on me. That's better. He started to say something else, but a wave of pain crossed his face. Elena reached for the pain medication Dr. Volkov had left. Here, take this. Victor swallowed the pills, then settled back. Stay with me? Where else would I go? His hand found hers again. Within minutes, he was asleep. Elena sat there, watching him breathe, feeling their baby move inside her, and realized something that both terrified and comforted her. This was her life now. Not the life she'd chosen at 20, but the one she'd fought for, adapted to, claimed as her own. And she wouldn't trade it. Not for safety. Not for normalcy. Not for anything. Because somewhere in the chaos and violence and fear, she'd found something real. She'd found him. And he'd found her, and together they were building something worth protecting. Victor's recovery was slow and frustrating. He was the kind of man who hated being still, who needed to be moving, controlling, managing. Being confined to bed with 2 bullet wounds made him impossible. I need to check the supply routes, he'd say, trying to sit up. Elena would push him back down. Your men are handling it. They don't know the new protocols. Then they'll learn. You need to heal. Elena, no. Doctor's orders. And mine. He'd glare at her, then wince because glaring required tensing muscles that were still stitched together. Elena would hand him more pain medication, and he'd take it, grumbling. But there were quiet moments, too. Times when the medication made him drowsy and honest in ways he never was when fully alert. One afternoon, 3 days after the shooting, he reached for her hand. I'm sorry, he said. Elena looked up from the book she'd been reading. For what? For all of it. For buying you. For forcing you into this world. For making you watch me nearly die. Elena set down the book. You didn't force me to stay. You gave me the choice, remember? I chose this. You shouldn't have had to choose. Maybe not. But I did. And I'd make the same choice again. Victor studied her face. Why? Elena thought about it. Really thought about it. Because you saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. You pushed me to be stronger, smarter, more capable than I ever thought I could be. You didn't treat me like I was fragile or stupid or disposable. You treated me like I mattered. You do matter. I know. That's why I stayed. Victor pulled her closer, carefully, mindful of his injuries. I love you. I don't think I've ever said that before. To anyone. But I love you. Elena's breath caught. She'd known it, on some level. Had felt it in the way he protected her, the way he looked at her, the way he'd risked everything to keep her safe. But hearing him say it made it real. I love you too, she whispered. Even though you're stubborn and controlling and you make terrible decisions when you're angry. Victor laughed, then groaned. Don't make me laugh, it hurts. Then stop being lovable. I'll try. They sat there in comfortable silence, Elena's head resting carefully on his uninjured shoulder, feeling the baby move between them. It was the most peaceful moment they'd had in months. But peace, Elena was learning, was always temporary in their world. Victor was back on his feet 2 weeks later, against Dr. Volkov's advice. He moved stiffly, favoring his right side, but he moved. And with movement came the return to business. The power vacuum left by Dimitri's death was substantial. His territory, his operations, his contacts, all of it was up for grabs. Victor's men were already moving in, securing what they could, but there were others circling too. Rivals who saw opportunity in the chaos. We need to consolidate quickly, Victor said at a meeting with his top people. Elena sat beside him now, no longer just an observer, but an active participant. before someone else decides they want what Dmitri left behind. What about his lieutenants? One of the men asked. Some of them are still operational. Offer them a choice. Work with us or find new employment, but make it clear there's no third option. And if they choose wrong? Victor's expression went cold. Then they chose wrong. Elena watched the meeting unfold, watched Victor operate with the kind of ruthless efficiency that had built his empire. But she also saw the toll it took. The tension in his shoulders, the way he unconsciously touched his injured ribs. He was strong, but he wasn't invincible. After everyone left, Elena confronted him. You're pushing too hard. You need more time to recover. I don't have time. If I show weakness now, everything falls apart. You're not showing weakness. You're showing common sense. Victor shook his head. In this world, there's no difference. Elena grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. Then change the world. You keep saying it's impossible, but you haven't tried. You just keep playing by the same rules that almost got you killed. And what would you have me do? Walk away? Retire? Become a civilian? No. But you could build something different, something that doesn't require you to risk your life every other week. Victor pulled away, walking to the window. This is all I know, Elena. Violence, power, control. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. The same way I learned your language. The same way I learned to fight. You're not stupid. You're just scared. He turned sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. I'm not scared. Yes, you are. You're terrified of being vulnerable, of admitting that maybe there's more to life than survival and dominance. You're scared that if you step back, even a little, everything you've built will disappear. Because it will. Maybe. Or maybe it'll transform into something better. They stared at each other, the tension thick between them. Finally, Victor's shoulders sagged. I don't know how to do that, he said quietly. So we figure it out together, like everything else. Victor was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Okay, but not yet. First, I need to finish consolidating Dmitri's territory. Make sure we're secure. Then we can talk about what comes next. It wasn't the answer Elena wanted, but it was progress. I'll hold you to that. I know you will. 2 weeks before her due date, Elena's water broke in the middle of a business dinner. They were hosting a group of potential partners, men who controlled shipping routes that Victor wanted access to. Elena was playing her role perfectly, charming and intelligent, asking the right questions, laughing at the right moments. And then she felt it, a sudden warmth, a pressure releasing. She looked down and saw the puddle forming beneath her chair. Victor, she said calmly, interrupting a conversation about tariffs, we need to go, now. He looked at her, saw her face, saw the water. His expression shifted from businessman to panic in half a second. The baby? Yes. Victor was on his feet immediately. Gentlemen, we'll have to continue this another time. My wife is in labor. The men scrambled to their feet, offering congratulations and well wishes that Elena barely heard. Victor was already helping her up, his arm around her waist. Hospital or here? He asked as they headed for the car. Hospital. Dr. Volkov said. Elena gasped as a contraction hit, sharp and strong and nothing like the practice ones she'd been having. Oh, that's different. What's different? That actually hurt. Victor's face went pale. Okay, we're getting you to the hospital. The drive was a blur of contractions and breathing exercises, and Victor gripping her hand so hard she thought he might break it. When they arrived at the private hospital Dr. Volkov had arranged, there was already a team waiting. They got Elena into a room, into a gown, hooked up to monitors. The contractions were coming faster now, harder. Elena had taken classes, read books, thought she was prepared. She wasn't prepared. This is awful, she gasped between contractions. Why didn't anyone tell me it would be this awful? Victor was beside her, looking helpless in a way she'd never seen. What do you need? What can I do? Invent time travel and prevent me from getting pregnant. Despite everything, Victor laughed. Little late for that. Dr. Volkov checked her progress. You're at 6 centimeters, still a ways to go. How many more ways? 4 centimeters. Could be an hour. Could be 6. Elena wanted to cry, but instead she grabbed Victor's hand and squeezed through the next contraction. It was 4 hours. 4 hours of pain that made Elena reconsider every decision she'd ever made. But Victor stayed beside her the entire time, letting her squeeze his hand, curse at him, blame him for this entire situation. "I hate you right now," she gasped. "I know. I'm never doing this again. Okay? I mean it. I believe you." Another contraction. Elena screamed. Finally, Dr. Volkov said the words Elena had been waiting for. "You're ready to push." What followed was the hardest physical effort of Elena's life. Harder than any training session with Alexei. Harder than anything she'd ever imagined. But with Victor beside her, with Dr. Volkov coaching her through it, she pushed. And pushed. And pushed. And then, at 3:47 in the morning, a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a girl," Dr. Volkov announced, holding up a tiny, squirming, perfect human. Elena was sobbing. Victor was crying, actually crying, tears streaming down his face. Dr. Volkov placed the baby on Elena's chest, and the world narrowed to that moment. This tiny person, covered in vernix and blood, and utterly beautiful. "Hi," Elena whispered. "Hi, baby girl. We've been waiting for you." The baby's eyes opened, dark, unfocused, trying to make sense of this bright new world. Elena touched her tiny hand and the fingers curled around hers instinctively. Victor leaned down, his hand covering both of theirs. "She's perfect." "She is." They stayed like that for a long time, just the three of them, in a bubble of exhaustion and joy and overwhelming love. Later, after Elena had been cleaned up and moved to a recovery room, after the baby had been weighed and measured and declared healthy, Victor sat in the chair beside the bed holding his daughter. He looked terrified. "I have no idea what I'm doing," he said. "Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. What if I mess her up? What if I'm too hard on her or too controlling or—" "Victor, look at her." He did. The baby was sleeping, her tiny chest rising and falling, her face peaceful. "You love her already," Elena said. "I can see it, and love is the foundation for everything else. We'll make mistakes. Probably a lot of them. But we'll also show up every day and try to do better. That's all anyone can do." Victor looked at Elena, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I want to be a good father." "Then you will be. It's that simple." They named her Sophia. No middle name, no family tradition, just Sophia, clean and beautiful and entirely her own. The first weeks were chaos. Elena had read about newborn sleep schedules, but reading about it and living it were completely different things. Sophia woke every 2 hours, demanding to be fed, changed, held. Elena was exhausted in a bone-deep way she hadn't known was possible. But Victor surprised her. He took to fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else. He learned to change diapers, to swaddle, to rock Sophia to sleep at 3 in the morning so Elena could rest. He read parenting books with the focus of someone studying for war. "It says here we should do tummy time," he announced one morning. "She's 2 weeks old." "The book says it's important for development." Elena smiled, exhausted but happy. "Okay, let's do tummy time." They laid Sophia on a blanket on the floor. She immediately started crying. Victor looked panicked. "Is she hurt?" "She just doesn't like it. The book said that might happen." "So what do we do?" "We try again tomorrow." Victor looked at his daughter, at her red, scrunched-up face, and carefully picked her up. Sophia stopped crying almost immediately, settling against his chest. "I don't think I can make her cry," Victor said, "even for her own good." Elena laughed. "You're going to be a complete pushover, aren't you?" "Probably." It was in these small moments that Elena saw the man Victor was becoming. Not the ruthless boss who commanded fear and respect. Not the husband who'd bought her from her desperate father, but a father who was gentle and patient and willing to learn. One night, when Sophia was 6 weeks old, Elena found Victor in the nursery at 2 in the morning. He was just standing by the crib, watching their daughter sleep. "You okay?" Elena asked softly. "I was thinking about my father," Victor said. "About how he saw family as a weakness. How he used people, even the ones who loved him. And I realized I spent my whole life trying not to be him, but I was doing it by avoiding everything he ruined: family, connection, love." Elena moved beside him, slipping her hand into his. "And now? Now I realize the way to not be him isn't to avoid what he corrupted. It's to do it right." To protect without controlling, to lead without dominating, to love without expecting anything in return. He looked at Elena, his eyes bright in the dim light. Sophia is going to have choices, real choices. Not the kind I had, where every option led to the same place. I'm going to build something different for her. How? Victor took a breath. I'm stepping back. From the violence, from the expansion, from the constant battles. I'm consolidating what we have, putting good people in charge of the operations, and transitioning to legitimate business. It'll take time, years probably, but I'm done risking my life. I'm done being the kind of man who might not come home. Elena's throat tightened. You mean that? I do. You were right. I was scared. Scared of being weak, of losing everything, of proving everyone right who said I couldn't be more than what I was. But I'm more scared of Sophia growing up without a father, of you raising her alone because I was too stubborn to change. Elena turned to him, her hands finding his face. I'm proud of you. Don't be. Not yet. I haven't done it yet. I've just decided to try. That's enough. That's everything. They stood there in the nursery holding each other, their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby. And Elena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The transition wasn't easy. Victor had to convince his men that he wasn't going soft, that stepping back from the violent side of the business didn't mean weakness. Some understood, some didn't. Those who didn't were quietly encouraged to find opportunities elsewhere. Victor poured money into legitimate enterprises, real estate development, import-export businesses that didn't involve anything illegal, technology startups. He was meticulous about it, using the same strategic mind that had built his criminal empire to build something legal. Elena worked beside him, not as an assistant, but as a partner. She had a mind for details he sometimes missed, and a way of reading people that complemented his own skills. Together, they started building something new. It took 3 years. 3 years of careful planning, strategic moves, and patient transitions. 3 years of watching Sophia grow from an infant to a toddler with her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. 3 years of becoming a family. On Sophia's 3rd birthday, they hosted a party at their new house. Not a fortress this time, but an actual home with a yard where Sophia could play, in a neighborhood where other families lived. There were no armed guards, no security cameras on every corner, just a normal house with normal people celebrating a little girl's birthday. Elena watched Victor chase Sophia around the yard, both of them laughing, and felt her chest tighten with emotion. This man who'd once bought her like property, who'd controlled every aspect of her life, was now on his hands and knees pretending to be a dinosaur because his daughter demanded it. People could change. It wasn't easy. It wasn't smooth, but it was possible. Later that night, after Sophia was asleep and the house was quiet, Victor found Elena on the back porch. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, sitting beside her. "Just thinking about how far we've come." Victor nodded. "Sometimes I can't believe it's real, that this is my life now." "Do you miss it? The old life?" Victor was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes, the certainty of it, the clear rules. You knew who your enemies were, what they wanted, how to deal with them. This is messier, more complicated. But better? Infinitely better. Because at the end of the day, I come home to you and Sophia, and that matters more than any empire I could build." Elena leaned against him. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad my father made that deal." Victor tensed slightly. "You don't have to say that. I'm not saying I'm glad about how it happened, but I'm glad about where we ended up. You gave me a choice, eventually, and I chose you. I'd choose you again." Victor pulled her closer. "I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do." "I know. You show it every day." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars, feeling the cool evening breeze. Somewhere inside, their daughter was sleeping. Their home was peaceful. Their future was uncertain but hopeful. It was everything Elena had never known she wanted. 6 months later, Victor made his final transition. He sold the last of his illegal operations to someone he trusted to run them without bringing heat down on anyone. The money from the sale went into a trust for Sophia and into foundations that Victor and Elena started together. The foundations focused on helping families in debt, on providing education and opportunities for kids who grew up in the same kind of desperation that had driven Elena's father to make his terrible choice. It wasn't charity, It was an attempt to break the cycles that created people like Victor and situations like the one Elena had been forced into. "Do you think it makes a difference?" Victor asked one day, reviewing proposals for families they might help. "Yes. Maybe not to everyone, but to some people, it'll be the difference between having options and having none. And that matters." Victor nodded, signing off on another approval. "My father would have hated this." "Good. That means we're doing it right." 2 years after that, Elena woke up feeling familiar nausea. She took a test, already knowing what it would say. Pregnant again. She told Victor over breakfast. He stared at her, a piece of toast halfway to his mouth. "Really?" "Really." He set down the toast, came around the table, and pulled her into his arms. "How do you feel?" "Terrified. Excited. Nauseous." "Same as last time, then." Elena laughed. "Pretty much. Are you happy?" "Are you kidding? I'm terrified too. But yes, I'm happy." Sophia, now 5 years old, was thrilled at the prospect of being a big sister. She immediately started planning all the things she'd teach the baby, all the games they'd play, all the rules the baby would need to know. "The baby has to listen to me," she announced seriously, "because I'm older and I know more." "We'll see about that," Elena said, trying not to smile. "And the baby can't touch my toys without asking." "That seems reasonable." "And the baby has to like dinosaurs because dinosaurs are the best." Victor scooped her up. "What if the baby likes something else? Like unicorns?" Sophia considered this very seriously. "Then I guess I'll have to learn about unicorns." "That's very generous of you." "I know. I'm a good big sister already." The second pregnancy was easier than the first. Elena knew what to expect this time, and her body seemed to remember what to do. Victor was less panicked, more confident. They'd done this before. They could do it again. Their son was born on a clear spring morning, Lucas. 8 pounds, healthy lungs, and a shock of dark hair that made the nurses laugh. "He looks just like you," Elena told Victor, exhausted but happy. Victor stared at his son with the same wonder he'd shown when Sophia was born. "He's perfect." "They both are." Sophia met her brother that afternoon, approaching the hospital bed cautiously. "Is that him?" she whispered. "That's him. Lucas. He's really small. You were small once, too." Sophia reached out carefully and touched Lucas's hand. His tiny fingers curled around hers. Sophia's eyes went wide. "He likes me," she breathed. "Of course he does. You're his big sister." Sophia looked up at Elena, her expression serious. "I'm going to protect him. Forever." Elena's eyes stung with tears. "I know you will, sweetheart." Victor put his arm around Sophia, pulling her close. "We'll all protect each other. That's what families do." 10 years later, Elena stood in the backyard of their home, watching her children play. Sophia was 15 now, tall and confident and terrifyingly smart. Lucas was 10, quieter than his sister, but with his father's intensity and focus. They were good kids. Not perfect. They fought sometimes, tested boundaries, made mistakes. But they were kind, thoughtful. They had choices. Real choices about who they wanted to be. Victor came to stand beside her, his hair showing gray now at the temples. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different everything is from where we started." Victor slipped his arm around her waist. "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" Elena thought about that question. Thought about the terrified 20-year-old who'd arrived in a cab to marry a stranger. Thought about the fear, the anger, the slow transformation from victim to survivor to something more. "No," she said honestly. "I don't regret it, because it led here, to this life, to our children, to us. Even knowing what you know now, what you had to go through, even knowing everything. Because you gave me something my father never could. You gave me choices, real ones. You let me become someone I never knew I could be." Victor pulled her closer. "You did that yourself. I just stopped standing in your way. We both changed each other." "Yes, we did." They stood there, watching their children, feeling the weight of the years and the lightness of the present moment. It hadn't been a fairy tale. It hadn't been smooth or easy or without pain. But it had been real, and it had been worth it. That night, after the kids were in bed, Elena found the notebook where she'd been writing memories. things she wanted to remember, things she wanted her children to know someday. She wrote, "I was sold into a marriage I never chose. That's how this story begins. But that's not how it ends. It ends with choice, with transformation, with two broken people who learned to build something whole together. I won't pretend it was easy. I won't pretend there weren't moments I wanted to run, to give up, to choose the safety of what I knew over the danger of what I didn't. But I stayed. Not because I had to, but because somewhere in the darkness, I found something worth fighting for. Your father is not a perfect man. Neither am I a perfect woman. We made mistakes. We hurt each other. We stumbled through becoming partners, becoming parents, becoming the people we needed to be for each other and for you. But we also loved each other, fiercely, imperfectly, with everything we had. And we built this life. Not the one we planned, not the one we expected, but the one we chose. Together. If you take anything from our story, let it be this. You are not defined by where you start. You are not trapped by the choices other people make for you. You always have the power to transform your circumstances into something better. It won't be easy, it won't be smooth. But it's possible. We are proof of that. Elena closed the notebook and looked around the room. Family photos on the walls. Sophia's artwork from elementary school. Lucas's collection of rocks he insisted were treasures, the comfortable mess of a life actually lived. Victor appeared in the doorway. "You coming to bed?" Elena smiled. "Yeah, I'm coming." She stood, taking one last look at the notebook, then followed her husband upstairs. Outside, the world kept turning. But inside these walls, in this life they'd built from the ruins of a forced beginning, there was peace. Not perfect peace, not uncomplicated peace, but the kind that came from knowing you'd survived the worst and found your way through to something real. And in the end, that was everything.